Hey, welcome back to the How to Podcast series with Dave. I'm glad to have you here. We're continuing our little mini-series around leveraging your entrepreneurial spirit. Today we're going to get a little bit critical, and I don't mean critical about you, but we're going to think critically, and we're going to do some analyzing and evaluating about our podcast. As entrepreneurs, even though we run with scissors and we are apt to try new things at the drop of a hat, we're just ready to go. We do measure very well, and we do review, and we do course correct, and we do invest a lot of time in measurement on what's happening with what our ideas are doing and how the world is accepting them. And I think that we as podcasters really need to spend some time taking a fine look at what we're doing in our podcast and how we're progressing, and to get feedback, very important, feedback for our podcast journey, so that we can learn from someone else's point of view as well. Very important. Glad you're here. Let's get into the conversation today. Podcast creators and hosts can really boost their quality of their show and their reputation by bringing in some critical thinking into every aspect of what you do as a podcaster through your production, creation, promotion of your show. This critical thinking is modeled by entrepreneurs, which means not accepting information at face value, but consistently questioning, analyzing, and seeking ways to improve. As podcasters, this mindset translates into creating some really great, rich content and helps us to make a sharper editorial choices for our show and make better decisions on who our guests are and the content we cover, and how to engage with our audience in a way that fosters a sense of loyalty and trust. All of these are the result of focusing in on a critical approach to thinking through our show and really analyzing and evaluating what we do as podcasters. So some key context for you as a podcaster as we get into this conversation. A reminder for podcasters, this entrepreneurial spirit that we have, or that we're developing, helps us to be adaptable, resilient, and curious as podcast creators. And it will help to drive to improve all the things that we do by simply being adaptable, resilient, and curious. I think that's three things that a lot of podcasters don't focus on, and it really could help your show. These qualities are really going to help your podcast to evolve and to stay relevant long-term, way past the honeymoon stage of starting a podcast. Critical thinking is a learnable skill that any of us can learn and adapt and put into our process. And this learnable skill of critical thinking, when practiced well, results in better questioning, research, content curation, and strategies around how we engage with our audience. So what are some practical approaches and takeaways from having a more critical eye on our podcast and analyzing and evaluating what we're doing as podcasters? Well, first, some deep critical thinking skills that we need as podcasters. During the research process, question your own assumptions and the validity of the sources you're pulling from to create your content. Are you simply relying on ChatGPT to give you your talking points for your show without validating any of the information? You might be talking about something that's not even true. Unsubstantiated, no source material, just an opinion, based on a regurgitated AI output, based on a query or an article that was uploaded by somebody with no credibility at all. And here you are spouting this off as if it's a fact, and you have no idea. During your research, question your assumptions. Can I validate what I'm talking about that's been given to me to talk through? Does it come from me? Does it come from somebody else? And how do I know it's true? Don't simply just script or record with surface level facts, but dig deeper and figure out your take on a nuance or the reliability of what you're talking about on your show. So that's one thing for you to think about. Be critical in your thinking skills and actively seek out and feature diverse perspectives. To have everybody on your show that sounds like you, looks like you, talks like you, thinks like you is not a diverse conversation at all. It's just another version of you. And in the fact that they're exactly like you and see the world the same way you do and have the same opinions, they're not required. They're not needed. But when you have somebody on who has a different approach than you do, that sees the world from a different perspective that you don't have vision to, that's more engaging for the audience because now they can hear two different opinions about the same topic. So actively look out for somebody who has a different perspective than you do. I think it adds a layer of credibility to you because you're showing more than one side to a topic, and it allows people to hear someone else's opinion other than yours. It's not all about you on your show. I'm sorry to tell you, but it's the podcast that you create is not all about you. It's all about the audience. And if we can offer a different perspective to our own deeply held beliefs, I think our audience gets a richer experience in the process. You need to challenge your own bias in the topic that you talk about. So if you're a real estate agent and you do one way of doing real estate and you never think of the other ways you could do real estate, bringing somebody on who has a different opinion and a different approach and is successful might be a great opportunity for you to learn something and set aside your own deep held beliefs and let somebody else take the stage and learn from them as well. So develop your critical thinking skills by doing your research and having a different perspective on your show. Another thing that really helps us to analyze and evaluate our show and be a little bit more critically thinking through our show is to have some skepticism and some curiosity as a podcaster. Treat each episode of your show as an investigation. Approach your topics like an entrepreneur would, approaching like an idea or a thought. What don't you know about this topic? What could be a more compelling angle to the subject you're talking about, something that you're not even thinking of? This skepticism drives a higher quality in your interviews and your discussions and even in your solo episodes. When you become a little bit more skeptic and a little bit more curious. When we use our curiosity to frame our questions, it helps us to engage our listeners. Curious hosts model a trait for their audience. For my Living the Next Chapter podcast, I'm a non-author host of an author podcast. So I'm already at a disadvantage because I've never been an author before and I don't know how to do it. But I'm curious. And when I bring on my guests over the last 600 episodes in 3 years, I've learned a lot from these experts as authors. And I'm not competing for the mic in the moment because they're the expert. They're the author and I'm not. And in that, I come through my show with a genuine skepticism about how books are made, my own bias about what I think a book gets from an idea to a shelf, and my own curiosity about how did you do this? And it features my guest. It's a very unique take on interviewing. Instead of me being the expert fighting for the mic over my guest in this battle of whose does it better. No, sometimes it's better just to be the curious skeptic for your show and bring on people that you don't know what they do and how they do it. It might be an interesting conversation for your show. And it's time to think critically about your podcast and go, do I always need to be the expert? Do I always have to have the last word? Do I always have to show that I am the best in this conversation? No, you don't. We need to evaluate the opportunities in front of us as podcasters because many opportunities will arise by having a show. And we need to avoid some of the scams in podcasting. I have heard so many podcasting gurus who are scam artists. I got to say, complete, utter scam artists. They are just out there to take your money. They're out there to hook you into something that you don't need, charge you an elaborate amount of money to do something quite simple. And when I hear people come to me and say I was charged X dollars to do this one task, I'm like, that's like a 5-minute task. And they're like, well, I don't know how to do that, so I paid the fee. Oh, so annoying to see how people are ripping people off in podcasting. I am not a big fan of this at all. There are a lot of scams out there. There's a lot of opportunities that come as well, though. But we have to be critically thinking through these opportunities and scams and analyzing and evaluating if this is a good option for us or not. So I want you to evaluate these opportunities and scams very carefully, because they're going to come in your inbox. Somebody's going to come and tap you on the shoulder and go, it's your lucky day. You need to know how to think through these things and make the right decision. If you're not sure, reach out to me and we can have a conversation. I have a good sniff detector on what some of these gurus are up to. Again, not a fan, and I might be able to save you a lot of money and heartache. But be analytical when guest pitches come to you, when a sponsorship comes in front of you. Again, I've had a very big company in podcasting, a tool and resource that many podcasters love, reached out to me and wanted me to advertise on my show, on this show, and do commercials and, all that stuff. And I said no, and I probably could have made a lot of money. But I said no because I don't use their product. I don't endorse their product, and I don't want to mislead you into a product that I wouldn't use myself. I could easily have taken the money. You wouldn't even have known. Except you'd be like, Dave, I notice you don't use the product you talk about. And that would make me feel very uneasy in your presence to know that you found me out. So I didn't. I didn't take the money, and I said no. And I did that for you, and I did that for me, because I don't have ads in my show. So you can evaluate some of these opportunities in sponsorship and collaboration that's going to come your way, but you need to filter them through your own creative thinking and your own analyzing of your show, and the evaluating of if it's on the right trajectory for your show. You need to have some kind of filter for this. Carefully vet the credentials of your potential guests. Again, I've mentioned on this show in the past, there's people reached out to me who listen to this show. They're like, Dave, question. I listened to this other podcast about podcasting, and this person's been doing it for quite some time and very popular in the space, but I noticed that you have never had them on your show. Is there a reason? Because I think they'd be a great guest for your podcast. I think they'd be awesome. They're really, really fun to listen to. And in that moment, I'm like, well, if you haven't heard them on this show, then A, I've never heard of them, which is going to be quite rare because I listen to a lot of shows about podcasting. But B, they're probably not a person that I would ever put in front of you and give them my endorsement because of how they show up in this world. They might have great content, but there's some things about their character and how they present themselves and things they say that demean other people that disqualify them from this show. And so, no, I won't have them on my podcast, and I'll never go on their show because, again, I don't want to get in front of that audience, because if they love that person, they're not my ideal audience. And again, we need to pick our audience, and we need to know who we're talking to. So if people love them, they're not going to like this show. So I say no. So I have a way of vetting these people and making sure that I only bring in the people that are going to bring value to you based on what we're building here on the How to Podcast series. So that's how I am using critical thinking, analyzing and evaluating my guests before I put them in front of you. I check out the credentials of my guests before they come to you. I scrutinize over everything that comes to me that is a potential sponsor, an ad, a collaboration, any of these things, because I don't want to put my brand, this show, and have it tainted by somebody else that I don't appreciate and I don't look up to and I don't support. Protect your show's brand by avoiding questionable associations with people who don't fit who you're trying to reach and don't fit your target audience. Entrepreneurs are always scrutinizing their business deals to make sure that nothing stops them from moving forward. So get out your scalpel, get out your microscope, and just look at these people in very detail before you ever commit to having them on your show. The people that you've heard on my show, I've vetted. And I've spent time with them. And I'm really proud of who's been on this show. If I accept a guest or a sponsor, what are the potential upsides and downsides of a relationship with them? And what might listeners perceive? That's the answer you need to ask yourself. You got to ask that question to yourself and go, if I agree to work with this person, what are the potential upsides and downsides of working with them? And what is my listener going to think of this relationship that just kind of came out of nowhere? Think about that. As podcasters, we need to sharpen our analysis and our judgment around our show and do, again, what's best for our audience. We need to reflect on our own podcast and what's working, what's not working, what could be better or deeper connection with our audience, or what could be more balanced in how we show up as a podcaster. And we need to encourage listener feedback and treat it as data that's going to help us to make our show better. We need to know the difference between fact and opinion. We need to understand how to present opposing or alternate views to our own beliefs even. And think of it in a way of how to create more diversity around the topic of what you're talking about. Okay? And by doing this, we help people to understand there's more than one point of view. There's multiple points of view around our topic. So if you have a show, I'm thinking of a friend Bill Monty with his Guide to Getting Older, you could have somebody on who doesn't believe there's such a thing as ageism, and maybe they're in their 20s and 30s and they don't see ageism as a problem. And you could have a conversation as two kind human beings around the topic of ageism for a podcast about growing older and how hard it is for somebody let go from their job in their mid-50s to find a new place of employment when people look at your resume and go, oh, you got too much experience to work here. That's also, no, AKA, you're too old to work here. And ageism exists. So having that conversation through the lens of, I believe, as the host of the show, that ageism exists, well, maybe having somebody on who doesn't believe in ageism, maybe they're an HR person or whatever, they wrote a book, then having a conversation about that might bring out some very interesting dialogue. Again, you're not bringing them on to have a fight. You're having them on to have a conversation. And your audience gets to see more than just your point of view, for example, on ageism. This is something that could really help your audience to connect with you and your topic a little bit more than just your voice and your opinion on these topics. So if you feel like you're being ranty on your show, where it's just a big Dave fest and you're just there spouting off all the things you hate in life and all the things that people are doing wrong around you, like most podcasts about podcasting, then bringing other people on and having them share their side of podcasting, even if it differs from how you do it, gives a more rich perspective and mosaic to your topic beyond your single point of view and opinion. Think about how you can bring other people into your world so that your audience gets a balanced approach to your topic. We can also help by promoting critical thinking in our audience as well. So podcasts aren't all about you, even though you're the host of the show. I know that's hard to hear, but your show's not all about you. It's all about your audience. And you can help your audience to develop their own critical thinking and thought processes by listening to your show. Ask your listeners more open-ended questions to encourage them to respond to questions. Don't give them yes and no questions like, do you like my show? Yes or no. But give them an opportunity to be more thoughtful and even critical about what's happening in the show. Model critical thinking explicitly. Explain your process when vetting your guests and getting your sources for your content or your ideas and what makes a good whatever as far as the topic of your show. And explain that to your audience. This is how I do what I do. So that your listeners become a little savvier and a little bit better in their own pursuit of facts and opinions and thoughts because they learned it through you. They modeled you in their own world outside of your podcast. So promote critical thinking by explaining how you approach it, and maybe somebody might learn something as they're listening, not just to your content, but also to your approach. What's some key takeaways we can take with us into our podcast this week around having a more critical approach to our show and analyzing and evaluating what we do? Here's some takeaways for you. Treat each stage of your podcast, from the creating of the topic, the research, the scripting, the interviewing, the editing, the promotion, as an opportunity to question your assumptions. to analyze your options and to reflect on the outcomes. The core of critical thinking is all in those steps. Question your assumptions, analyze your options, and reflect on the outcomes. Do that for your show and filter it through that filter. When I make coffee, I use a coffee machine, and we put a filter in to keep the ground coffee from going into my drink, because it's not fun to chew your coffee. So that's why there's a filter there, and that's what it does. It's its job to keep the coffee bits out of my coffee drink. And you need a filter for how you do your show. And that could be part of it then, to question your assumptions, analyze your options, and reflect on the outcomes. When's the last time you did that for your show? Intentional skepticism, going through deep research around your topic, and even planning out different scenarios will help you to improve the depth and accuracy and then also the credibility of your content. Setting your podcast apart in a crowded field of a lot of other people talking about the exact same thing that you were talking about. Just go through these steps, and I can pretty well guarantee the majority of podcasters don't do this. So if you want to stand out in a world of a busy podcast landscape, simply by having a more critical approach to what you do and reviewing your steps and being thoughtful is going to make your podcast better. It naturally will, because no one else is doing this to the same degree that you're going to. And model these skills for your listeners. You do not only elevate your own show, but you also help them to build a more thoughtful and engaged podcast community, and helping them navigate your podcast in real life as they apply your leadership to how they approach their own world. Podcasters who apply these principles won't just deliver information, because there's so much information, but you're actually going to cultivate a richer and more trustworthy conversation with your audience that's really going to inspire your audience to be more loyal and to learn not just for themselves, but also for those that are in their world as well. Your podcast can have a huge impact on people. And I think as we think through what we do in a thoughtful and methodical way, we will have better results, long-term results, better connection, and in the long run, a better podcast. And if you want a better podcast that grows, then you need to do your homework. And if you have questions, I'd love to help you. Reach out anytime. We have 2 more episodes in this 10-part series coming up, and I'm so glad you're here. If you haven't heard the other 7 previous to this episode, please go back, because they're all themed around the same. You'll notice on your listening app, the artwork's a little different as well. So you'll see, and in the title of each of the 10 episodes, it starts with leveraging your entrepreneurial spirit. So go back and take a listen to the other ones. They all go together. They all kind of fit together as one big group of 10. And I'd love to get your feedback. howtopodcast.ca. Thanks for being here. Take care. Hey, thanks for being here. Thank you for listening to the end of the podcast. You're here with me. I'm so grateful. I want to put something in front of you. For the person that's listened this far, you're my new best friend. So what I'm trying to do every month is I have a goal, and you can help me with this goal. Very simple. What I'm trying to do is have 5 conversations this month with listeners of the How to Podcast series. You don't have to have a podcast to respond. This can be the first time ever that we're going to have a conversation, but I'm looking to talk to 5 people. Now, you're still here, so you're one of the people that I would love to talk to next. So on my howtopodcast.ca website is a calendar, and I'd love to have you respond on howtopodcast.ca. Just click the calendar link, set up time in my calendar, and in the comments section for the meeting, just put something like listener. That's it. If you have a show, put it in the comments too so I can go listen. But if you don't, I just want to talk to 5 listeners every month from now to the end of the month. So if you're listening to me right now, you're the person I want to talk to. And through howtopodcast.ca, you and I can get together, chat about the show, Chat about your journey as a podcaster. Where are you at? What do you need this show to become for you? What's missing? Your feedback. I just want to meet you. And as podcasters, I would encourage you to do something similar to this in your podcast so that you can meet and interact with your audience. So, howtopodcast.ca, I'm looking to talk to 5 people every month, and I would love for you to be one of them. Reach out. It's free. I'm not selling you anything. I just want to talk to you at howtopodcast.ca. Let's get in the calendar and chat. Thanks for listening.